Councilwoman Ward.
I would actually like to defer to Shannon Radwall.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I appreciate everybody that is also able to attend this meeting with us. As an elected official, we're all chosen to represent an entire community. Our residents depend on us to ask questions, seek answers, and to find solutions that create a brighter future for everyone, not just a selected few. One of our most important responsibilities as a council is to review and approve a balanced budget that is transparent, responsible, and in the best interest for our citizens. Last month, we held a budget retreat. While the meeting was open to the public, unfortunately, it was not live streamed like it is in the years past, which limited access to many residents who could not attend in person. During that retreat, handouts were provided, and I would like to reference this morning. I will reference and discuss Exhibit 5, which outlines departmental expenses. The first line item for each department is salary expenses. We as a council are now being asked to approve a pay study adjustment without having received a full detailed report. We have been told for the details will come after the budget is approved. I don't know how we're supposed to approve a budget if we don't have the full report. I have personally reviewed the proposed payroll increase for each department and calculated the percentages increase. What concerns me is that we paid a significant amount of taxpayers' money for this pay study, a process that reportedly took 6 months to complete, including interviews with individual employees and documented detailed description for each employee's roles within the town. However, the council has not been provided with the detailed findings of that study. Instead, we have only received a summary sheet showing minimums, averages, and market figures. We have not seen the supporting information regarding job description, years of service, qualification, experience, and the methodology using to determine these proposed figures for our town employees. Additionally, some of the numbers being proposed appear different from the recommendations originally from the Triad company that conducted the study. That raises important questions. Where did these numbers come from? Who adjusted them, and on what basis were those adjustments made? All of these questions are questions that we should have as council before we move forward and pass a budget, in my opinion. Transparency matters, especially when taxpayer dollars are involved. Our citizens matter, and that's why I have these questions. Next, I would like to address the proposed fire tax. Many residents have contacted me with concerns because they understand that our fire department is already funded through the town's general fund. Following last Monday's meeting, I received numerous calls from some of you that are sitting out here today. The conversations from the community members who are upset about the title being given to this proposed tax increase. Many residents feel the wording is misleading. As an elected official, I believe it is my responsibility to listen to my constituents and take to their concerns seriously. After doing some research, my understanding is that in order for it to be a separate fire tax to be added to our property tax bill, the town council must first approve it, and then it must go in front of a board of commissioners, and all funds for the fire tax could only be used for the fire department. So if this is going for anything other than fire, including police, we cannot call it a fire tax. It is important to note the majority of this purpose for the 13-cent tax increase appears to allocate toward funding the pay study increase, not solely fire protection services. I also want to make it clear that I support building a public safety building. I've heard over the past week that that is something that people are questioning. I do not have a problem building a building that we have needed for so long. But the fact is, I believe that we need to understand how much it's going to cost before we pass a budget to understand how that money is going to be raised from our community. Just last month in our retreat, I was told we could not spend a penny over $10 million because we simply could not afford it. Just last week, I had a conversation with Mr. Herms, the mayor, and Mr. Weichel, and I was told that now we are looking at $10.8 million to $11.2 million. We are being asked to support a 31% tax increase, a 7% water increase, and at the same time anticipating and depending on Burke County raising property tax by approximately 20% next year in order to fund the public safety building. How can this council responsibly approve a budget when there is still no definitive total cost for the project? To me, that feels like signing a blank check. I have never operated that way financially, and I do not plan to do so now. Our citizens deserve honesty, accountability, and financial responsibility from all of us. Before asking residents to shoulder significant increases in taxes and utility costs, I believe this council owes them the complete information, open discussion, and a clear understanding of exactly what they are being asked to pay. Thank you. So, if you can put that picture up there. So this is a picture that, it shows that there's a 13% tax raise that we're wanting to incorporate into the town of Valdese. What that reflects is it's a 31% tax hike for everybody across the board. My question is, where is the money actually going? Is it a tax for fire tax, or is it a tax for the pay study, or is it a cumulative tax? What are we doing?
So, I will try my best to answer as much as I can. In order to fund the, police and fire station, we need this additional 13 cent. It goes back to the tax rate that the town had operated on for the majority of the decade. When the taxes was cut 3 cent and then again on 10 cent, the way that the staff balanced the budget was taking out any future debt service payments. That was one of the ways that the budget, and Bo, if I'm incorrect, please correct me because I wasn't here for that. But from my understanding, that was how the budget basically got balanced at a staff level. They took away the money used for debt service. At that time, the building was going to be an estimated, what I've seen on paper, I wasn't here, $7.3 million. Since then, the same building has increased to somewhere between, we haven't got a firm figure, but we have got a range somewhere between 10.25 and 11.25, depending on several factors that we're working through, such as, do we put tile floor down or do we use stained concrete? Do we put ceilings in it or do we paint and leave exposed ceilings? There's a number of things that we're working through at a staff level with the contractor to try to mitigate some of that cost. The 10.8 is not to exceed, because we have to have a number to go to the LGC, and it has to be a realistic number that they could look at and review our finances. The LGC handles buildings across the state on a monthly basis. They understand the cost of building better than probably anybody. I know they understand it better than I do. So they will look at the plans, look at what we're looking at, and then they would come up and say if the number we're using is a realistic number. Without the 13 cent increase, I don't think the LGC will approve the loan to build the public safety building. As far as what the money's going for, right now, the fire department is 100% funded out of the general fund, so the fire tax would offset that. So it would relieve pressure on the general fund, that things that the general fund are paying for now, it would take some of that out, and we could use that money for other things such as the pay study. There's also another important aspect of this is we're also banking on a positive reevaluation when the county does their reevaluation to offset some of the additional costs going forward as well.
We're depending on that though, aren't we?
Yes.
So what happens if Burke County comes in and they only have a 20% increase? Are we gonna raise taxes again for our town?
We have some things in there that we would have to adjust, such as maybe not do as much paving as we've done in the past, maybe not do other things as we've done in the past. I have said since the very beginning, the LGC is not going to approve the loan unless we can show that we can pay for it.
And I understand that. And going back through Exhibit 5, talking about streets and paving, we're taking all of the $325,000 every year out of the street paving, and we're putting it into the public safety building. Is that correct?
I think it's 375.
375, you're correct.
Yeah, so we get roughly, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think we get somewhere between $110,000 and $150,000 a year in PAL bill, which is what the cities most cities use for. Well, we have to use it for paving and streets. In the past, the town has supplemented that to the tune of $375,000. So going forward, that the tax dollars paid into the general fund would be supplemented into the public safety building and not additional money towards paving. So we're about to do a huge paving project. We're finishing up the smaller ones, and we've got, I think, 1.1 or 1.2 million that we're about to release. We're going to do that probably over phases, and we'll get the majority of the list done. And then going forward, instead of completing the list, the rest of the list in 7 to 10 years, it may be 15 or 20 years before they get completed.
I think my concern right now is when you're talking about a reval next year, that is going to possibly be another 27%. I mean, it basically boils down, taxes will go up that way too. And when you already have people calling about a 13.5-cent raise, I think we need to go ahead and look at cuts now, other than later down the road. The fact that the first thing that comes up for us to cut is our street paving shows that our priorities are off in this town. When you have departments that can say that they only fund 42.5% of their department. I'm not talking about like utilities, that sort of thing. I'm talking about things that have been wants for our town. But those are things that may need to be cut, because if you don't have streets to get to things, people don't care. If people drive into our town and it feels like you're, that's things that people care about. We definitely need to be looking into departments and saying, okay, until we get our needs fulfilled. I love the bells and whistles of Valdese. I will always be, I will always say Parks and Rec is huge for my kids, my family. My kids grew up on those fields. I understand that. But are there cuts that need to be made? I'm not saying these are easy for us. I have wrestled with this. I have been up late at night going, what do we have to cut to make sure? And another thing, something that the mayor has brought up in his talks to different people, our town, the median age is 53.5 years old. We are known as an older town. We are aging, which means most of the people who are living in houses either have inherited those houses, they don't have mortgages to spread the taxes out. So you have people on fixed incomes who are trying to pay their taxes every year, who are having to either leave Valdese, find something else, somewhere else to live, who have lived here their whole life, but we're not willing to make the cuts to make it okay for them to still live in the town that they've called home for years. Things like that matter to me. That's the calls I'm getting, that's the emails I'm getting, is how do we afford this? And I think there are some hard decisions that need to be made. And on top of that, to not know exact numbers, and not even before our budget meeting on the 28th, I don't know how we're expected to make any type of decision, definitely. So until I get until I see that we have made cuts where they need to be made, I can't be okay.
What are you proposing?
Well, I'm proposing that we possibly have any cuts been, I do not like the fact that every time we bring this up, we go immediately to our streets. Well, if we don't raise the taxes, we're gonna have to cut our street paving. There are other things. If departments, what departments do we have right now? I wanna see numbers for which departments are we seeing the most drain from? I know that is a hard question to ask, but do we have departments where we need to look and say, we're gonna say you at least have to bring in 50 to 60% of your revenue? There's questions like that I feel like as a person who has to deal with a budget for a 501c3 and my own business and myself, are we not, I just don't see how we can make it to where everybody is paying for something when we definitely need a public safety building to keep everyone, safe. There are other programs that we're gonna have to look at now, because I sat in that meeting and I asked that question. I sat in the budget meeting and it was not live streamed, so I have no proof that anything got said the way, some things were not recorded, even in the minutes that I had said correctly. Now that I'm going back and looking at them, but I specifically said, if it is over $10 million, will we be able to afford it? And I was told no. So that tells me now, if we're already looking at 10.8, 11.2, what are we gonna have to cut to afford it now? Because people are coming after us next year when that revow hits, because we're depending on this revow to up the revenue to the town, which means our citizens will be paying more in 2027. And I'm just wondering, do we need to take hard looks at things now instead of saying, we'll just keep pushing the hard decisions down the road and just say, keep taxing them, keep taxing them, keep taxing them? That's my thoughts on it. I know it's do or die with the public safety building. I understand that. But are there other things that we need to look into evaluating?
Council? Any questions?
And again, when I was asked about the 10 million, if we could afford it, maybe I didn't communicate properly the way I should have. I was basically saying we can't afford anything more than 10 million without making changes to our normal operating budget, which includes, some street paving and some other things.
But we talked about that.
We operated, we developed this budget based off of what we was directed. We can, at the end of the day, the budget is the council's. So council gives us direction, and we will be more than glad to go in that direction.
We talked about the paving in that retreat.
Yes.
That was also discussed, so that was already part of the 10 million.
Yes.
So I think that's why we're looking at what else is gonna be cut, or how
Well,
much more our tax is gonna go up.
Let's get the numbers guy up here, so.
I was waiting to be released here. All right. So I'm going to recap. I'm just going off the cuff here because I didn't know what we were talking about today. So we're just going to kind of recap what we talked at the budget workshop and go from there. So at the budget workshop, we had First Tryon advisors. We engaged with them this year to help us with this process because we knew there were some hard decisions coming. There was 3 things that we outlined in the budget workshop that needed to happen in order to make the pay study work as presented by Triad, and also make the public safety building work. So the first thing was a fire district tax, which we're looking at here. 13 cent is the number we came to based on the following 2 items that were going to be a major factor in this. So that next item would be next year's revow. To go rate neutral on that revow. We don't know what that percentage is yet. We have a range, so we're taking the low end of that range. So you got the fire district tax now, and you go rate neutral on the appraisals next year. And then the third thing, which was our fallback because we didn't know, it was a little bit of a buffer, but the $375,000 in paving. That is a contribution from the general fund for paving. And if you remember in the POW bill, we have another 125 to make a total of 500,000. So we're not totally taking away from the paving if we were to go that route. And if we needed it, we would still have 125 per year to put towards paving. And like Manager Herm said earlier, this budget currently has the 375 allocated towards that paving project. So when we add that to what we already have saved up, we have a little over $1 million still that we can do some paving work over the next few years. But as First Tryon kind of presented all this, these three things were necessary. The total shortfall, and I'm just kind of off the cuff of this, was between 1.6 and 1.7 million dollars is what we need in the budget for these two items, the pay study and the public safety building. So when you're talking about cuts, these cuts are pretty significant. The reason why we have these three revenue generating items in here is because we know the town wants to keep services the same. At least that's the assumption through our discussion with the council. We don't want to cut any services. So the budget that's been presented this year is not cutting services. Now, if we were to cut services, obviously, to make up $1.6 million is big cuts. So that's kind of where we're at this point.
So if we keep things rate neutral next year, does that not mean we're gonna have to do cuts? Because every year the budget keeps going up, up, up. So next year, however we look at it, next year there's gonna have to be cuts made if we keep everything the same after the reval and everything else.
Well,
So,
rate neutral is different than revenue
Is it?
neutral. So
So
just
we'll-
look at those two things confused. So
Okay.
revenue neutral is what we did a few years ago where we dropped the tax rate now. Rate neutral would be using what the county provides as the appraisal and using that number and keeping our current tax rate the same.
even though we're counting on that from what I was, like, what we were understanding in the meeting,
Yeah.
even though that we're kind of counting on that for the public safety building also to help make sure we stay in balance. I'm
Right.
just,
We would rely on that.
I just feel like there's gonna be a lot of sacred cows dying in the next little bit in Valdese.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna have to happen. And I hate to say that, but we've danced around it for years, but there are some things that, I'll be the most unpopular person, but there are things that are gonna have to be cut to keep people able to live here and wanting to move here. When we have citizens calling and saying, we are leaving Valdese if this gets approved, and I don't put it past them, and I know it's for everyone, they're gonna keep coming back in. I don't see that. I see our town, if you tax people to death, they're not gonna wanna be here. And I'm just making sure, is this live stream, this slide right here? I wanna make sure that's on the live stream, because I know last week there were things that
I
didn't
didn't
get
switch
put up.
over the computer. I'll go
Okay.
in a second.
I just wanna make sure the citizens can see that, because another problem we are having is our budget meeting was not live streamed. So we have citizens asking questions that we are trying to answer for them today, because we need to talk about, do we need to make recommendations today? Because they didn't get to see a lot of the slides that we saw in the tax retreat. And those are important for our citizens to see, to understand, because they talk about transparency, we all talk about transparency, but that meeting was not transparent.
Councilwoman Ward, what are your revisions? This is the purpose of this meeting today. This is
Well,
not a
we
budget
were to
hearing.
considering. So
Consider-
we are
all right, so
considering.
what are your
We not-
revisions?
Well, we are considering them. We are talking about them to see what we need to consider. We're asking the questions to see what we need to consider. We didn't say we were making revisions, we said we were considering revisions. So that is what I'm doing. Did you have any more questions,
Do we need
Councilman?
to have the tax, are we to raise the taxes in order to pay the pay study as well?
The technical answer to that would be no. However, that would cause us to dip into the fund balance. And if you're not planning on going rate neutral next year, then we wouldn't be able to fund the 100% of the pay study.
So then we should not be calling it a fire tax because it is truly being used for more than just the fire department.
What percentage of we looked at that, what percentage of the pay study is for fire department? Wasn't it like 30%?
34%, I believe.
Yeah, so the vast majority of the pay study is going towards the fire department. Again, the total fire department budget is higher than the fire tax would be. So what we would do is we would use that to fund the fire department and take the money that was currently being used to fund the fire department and shift it over to address other needs.
So, I'm just going rounding numbers here, but your total fire department budget's around 1.2 million. So the 13 cents is generating 742,000. So it's still falling short of the total fire department budget. But if you infuse that money into the fire department,
I'm not
that-
talking about their budget, I'm talking about the fire department. We're calling it a fire tax, and we had said earlier that we were using that for the public safety building.
Right, it would be for the public safety building as the payment becomes active. That would be part of the fire department budget and supporting that budget.
So under North Carolina general statute, it says funds collected through the fire tax are required to maintain a separate fund and used specifically for fire protection purposes. The statute is 69 TAC 25 TAC 4.
Yeah, and it would be outlined in the budget ordinance. That when council adopts the budget ordinance will outline, it'll have that separate line in there.
But how are we calling it a fire tax when when we're paying for the pay study for the people in the town are, in order to do the pay study, I'm being told it's gonna be $514,000
Right,
to fund the pay study. And you're saying that the taxes that we're getting to raise is gonna be $742,000.
it'd be
So that
helpful,
leaves 228,
it would be helpful if you could see the budget ordinance itself that outlines how those numbers are working. I can't pull it up right now, but how it shows the fire tax revenues and then the fire operations being supported by that. And then the fire operations revenue under the general fund ad valorem tax is decreased by that amount.
And at the end of the day, whether we call it a fire tax or we increase the ad valorem tax by 13 cents, the amount of money that we need to bring in to our bank account to pay our bills with those directions that we was given for the pay study and the public safety building equals X. However we get there is whatever council wants to do. But if we're gonna continue to offer the same services we offer and build a police and fire station, we need to get to that X number. Whether you call it a fire tax or you raise the ad valorem tax, or we start looking at doing significant program cuts, and it won't be just one program, it'd be multiple programs.
but it's my understanding that we don't know the 13 cents is gonna cover that public safety building, because we don't have an actual number for
So
what that's
once,
gonna cost us.
once we got a good range, once we get the actual number, we have 60 days until that number is no longer valid. It's the part of the design build that we entered into.
It went up over $1 million in 1 month. I would say that's higher than a range.
Well, there's a lot of things that factor into that.
I understand that it's the fuel and everything else, but that can still go up from here. And so that's my biggest concern, is how are we supposed to approve a budget when we don't know if it's gonna, next year, we're gonna be sitting here again and saying that we need to add another 5 cents or another 10 cents to our town. And I have a problem with that, because I'd have never approved a budget on anything without having the final number on something.
Yes, I understand where you're coming from on the final number. The best I can do is to give you the range that was given to us by our contractor, which is what I've said. And to tell you that we're trying our best to get it all in before the start of the third quarter, because I have a suspicion, and a lot of people do, those numbers aren't coming down. They're only going to continue to rise. The building has went from 7.3 to over, to 10.8 to 11 since 2023. So 2.5 years, it's went up that much.
Well, I know in 2024, we did the same thing with the fire department and the police department, and it was, said it was gonna be 9.2 million, when that was with Talley and Smith. That was in the meeting on May 2024, on Massell Avenue.
That's how much we were told back in, a couple of years ago. We could get a loan for $7.2 million, but we were gonna have to subsidize at least another $2 million on top of it.
But the
to
building was
cover
gonna
it.
be
Yeah,
9.2 then.
Yeah, the building was still, the same.
I think that just goes to show what I'm trying to say is the building is not gonna get any cheaper. It's only gonna continue to rise. Once we get the firm number, which we should have, early June to mid-June, we have 60 days from that point to either accept it or not. And that will be a vote by council. Me and Bo does not have that authority.
And is this pardon me, go ahead.
We're just trying to get everything lined up with the LGC because you just can't call the LGC and say, we want to get on your agenda. You have to do that a couple months in advance. In fact, we have a call with them tomorrow, basically to get your pre-approval based off of what we're recommending. And then we'll go from there. It's a tight schedule, but under state law, there's only so much that we can do. We've also, within that 60 days, have got to go out and get bids from banking institutions on the loan itself before we go back to the LGC.
Is that 10.8 or 11.2, does that include just construction, or is that site prepping, equipment, architecture surveys, does that include everything?
That's total package, yes. There's some furniture that probably not included, but we've got a donation of most of the furniture.
And you're anticipating the final number to be when?
Sometime early to mid-June.
And why don't they have that now? Because they've been working on it for months.
They're
Well,
still in-
there's
they're
a
still
few
in the civil
things-
design phase, so.
There's a couple things go in there. One, I mean, I don't know if he wants it public or not, but our contractor had a medical issue with his family that took up a couple of weeks. Like I said, we've been going back and changing the design at a staff level multiple times in an exercise to try to get the price as low as possible.
So when there's furniture, we have the IT's part, all that is already, that's it, that's built into the 11.2, or is it just
Yes, ma'am.
furniture that's not? Okay. And there's nothing else outside of that furniture that we're gonna say, oops, we missed that one?
As far as I can answer today, no. We've included everything that we can think of. Now, when we get in there, if we try to move, what's the thing that we had, Truman, what's the thing we got up there that fills the oxygen tanks? I can't think of the. Yeah, so if we try to move that, it falls off the truck or something, I can't account for that. You know what I mean? Like, there's things that we're gonna have to transport and we're gonna have to move, and they work perfectly fine where they're at. We're hoping and we're banking that they'll work perfectly fine when we get them to where we're going. But for me to sit here and say 100% that an accident's not gonna happen or something's not gonna pop up, I don't think anybody can say that with any construction project.
And just so we know too, will there be if we have this great windfall in Valdese, can we pay this one off earlier? Then I know we have 3 loans out there that are USDA loans that we're not allowed apparently to pay off early, we discussed that in our meeting. I'm just kind of curious why we can't pay those off to help put some of that debt service to this. Because we were told by Tron to not take any money. They just said basically borrow the entire amount. It would be better for us, is what I think I remember. So I was just trying to see if like these other 3 USDA loans, like for the town hall, the splash pad, the fire truck, is there any way we could pay those off to put some of that toward debt service?
We'd have to look into what the agreements were for that, but if you were to take money to pay off the current debt we have, you'd be better off using that money as a down payment towards a public safety building because it has a higher rate. So it's how you use the money that if you were gonna pull money out of fund balance, it'd work harder for you if you use it to borrow less on public safety.
Because that's not, Tron told us that it was better for us to borrow the entire thing other than take it from fund balance to do a down payment, because I think we had asked about that also.
I'm just saying, if you were gonna take money to pay off other debt, you'd be better off taking that money instead and borrowing less on public safety. Ideally, what First Tron was saying is if you borrow the whole thing, that just leaves you a little bit of breathing room in your fund balance.
I just wish that had been live streamed, so we are receiving a large amount of questions, and that's part of why I'm asking too, because if we could put some of that debt what we're paying on debt service toward those loans, like any of it, like if we paid off the town hall, so we're not, that's crazy, $1 million, and now it's 3 million, it's just keeps on going. So I didn't know if there was any way we could pay off one of those loans to put some of that toward, it is,
Right.
My understanding is this loan with First Tron, correct, would be 20 years, and it will be paid off before Town Hall and the splash pad.
Correct.
We've Bo ran the numbers, and a few years, back when we first started this, the way the loans are structured through USDA, there's no real tangible benefit to paying them off early because of the structure of the loan. All the payments we've been making has been, very little of it's been going to principal. And but the loan payments are so low that that's why I guess the town did it at the time they did it. However, they've done multiple of those and they've stacked them on top of each other. So, while our debt sheet would look better, I don't think our total bank account would look better, if that makes any sense.
I guess at this time, what revisions are you wanting to recommend?
I was just considering them. So we were
Well,
just considering,
The other thing I'd like to mention before we close anything is the pay study.
Yes.
Our pay study is vague at best. It is generalized from much larger towns and does not seem to show fairness from one department to the other. During our retreat, we spoke about our town employees and the pay increase and what is needed for each department, and that we were below the state average. It was discussed that each department would receive a raise. Fire department, police department would be the highest. Department heads would speak to their hourly employees and let them realize that, yes, they will receive a small pay raise. However, their hours are going to be cut from 40 hours a week to 35 hours a week, and no overtime would be allowed. I don't see how that is fair to every town employee across the board when the hourly employees, most of them are the ones that are, coming out in the middle of the night when we have a busted water pipe, or they're scraping our roads when it's, snowing outside. And we're expecting to give them, I think that you had said in your last email that they're averaging between, maybe a 3 to 5% pay increase, but yet we're going to take 12% of their hours. How does that give them a pay increase?
So the true pay increase would be closer to 18%, but when you take a 12% cut in hours, the net increase would be between 3 and 5%.
So they're getting a 12% pay increase, or a 3% pay increase if you're taking 12% of their hours,
Yes, but they're working less hours.
right?
And I have said since the very time we first talked about this, I don't know if this is gonna work. At the end of the day, staff was tasked with some very, very heavy lifts, some very heavy projects, and we was tasked with trying to figure out a way to pay for everything that was equitable and as fair as possible. This is what I've come up with. If council does not like this, we can always do the pay study flat out without the 35 hours, but that is an additional 180.
Well, in years prior, they would get 5% across the board, where for the people that are going to be hourly, they're getting 3%, so they would have been better off.
If we had not have done the pay study and just gave a 5% pay increase, you're right, but.
No, the people that I'm right, because you're telling these people that are hourly that they're going to get a 3% pay increase instead of a 5% pay increase. I mean, the money's the money.
Yeah,
So you're telling that fire and police are going to not be touched, they're going to get their pay increase, and then all of the department heads that are salary, their money's not going to be touched, and everybody up here that's sitting here is not going to have their pay touched. But everybody that's working hourly for our town, their hourly rate is going to be not very much, and they're only going to work 35 hours a week, and no overtime is allowed.
But didn't, because of moving the rate up, some of these people are moving up 10, 11%,
some of them.
not just 3.
I wouldn't
Some
know,
of
I don't
correct.
have a full pay study.
That was
exactly.
on one of these papers, I think.
I have an email that says
Email.
a variety of things, but I don't have a full pay study.
So not every employee
Yeah.
is getting 3%. Based on the pay study, it depends on where they fell on that pay study. We use 3% because that's the minimum somebody would get, right? So if they were higher on the pay scale originally, then their needle didn't move too much, so they would get 3% no matter what, even if they fell below where the pay study shows they're gonna fall. So when we say they're only getting 3%, but they're also working 5 hours less a week, which is also
So
a
you're saying the
benefit.
people that are getting 3% are making more than the average?
Correct.
Yes.
They would move up based on their hourly rate.
And they're normally the ones who have been hired in the last 1 to 2 years because they came in. To get someone in that position, we had to start them out higher than what the people that started out 3 or 4 years before them.
So how are we
We are
supposed to know
currently-
this? We don't have.
Well, we are currently working on a public information request for that. Once we get it, we will share it with the entire council. We hope to have it sometime in the next day or two.
Yeah, and typically the way the process works is when a town does a pay study, the actual individual pay is not released to the employees until it actually passed because it gets their hopes up that, they might be getting this pay. So when we present something or, I'm not just saying Valdese, but other towns, they present something, it's more of a summary of here's how the pay study is affecting the budget. If council wants to get into the details of what each person looks like and how it's affecting their particular, I'm more than happy to sit down and talk. Me and Todd are happy to sit down and talk with them on that. But that's kind of the reason why that information is not, presented in detail in a meeting.
So you'll be able to show us an hourly employee what they're making now and what they will be making with the pay increase.
Yes, sir.
And we haven't seen that yet. I haven't.
Correct.
But you.
So if you've got a guy that's making $18 an hour and working 35 hours, how much increase is he gonna get?
Yeah, his hourly pay would go up enough to make at least 3% more than what they're making now. Now, if the pay study shows that they need more than 3%, then that accounts for that. But they'll be making 3% more than what they're making now. Their hourly rate will adjust for that difference in hours.
So we can kind of get a idea of how much each person, not each person, but each department is, because you've got your salaries and wages at the top of each of the budget allocations. So we can kind of see, if there's a huge jump in salaries from last year, we can kind of go, okay, that department was apparently very underpaid, that sort of thing, see who is getting the most of the salary increase. Okay.
And I'll tell you, those four biggest departments are your police, your fire, water, and wastewater departments.
I think another
like I said-
question that I have is, if we go back to the 40 hours of the hourly paid employees and the pay increase included in that, how much is that gonna cost us?
So that would cost, for the general fund, it would cost an additional $75,000, and the utility fund, it would cost an additional $115,000. Even under that plan, there's some that are still gonna be just getting 3% based on where they fall in that pay study.
I don't understand.
So there's, even on a 40-hour hourly rate,
Yeah,
there's some employees that are higher up on the pay scale based on when they were brought in to the organization, that they are still above that pay study. So that 3% will still kick in for them. Now, when you go back to 35 hours, it just becomes more employees that fall under that umbrella.
So are we doing an across-the-board raise for everyone this year, or is it just we're trying to adjust? And these are questions I'm asking because citizens were not privy to a budget retreat this year. Is it a all-across-the-board pay increase, or are we just saying only the ones who were below are getting a pay increase? Because we're getting asked that question.
Okay, good question. So how the pay study works is they look at grade levels. So in the updated pay plan, grade levels for certain positions move up. So the higher grade level you are in, the higher your salary range or your hourly range is. So when we're looking at, let's just say a police officer position, they studied that grade level against other grade levels of other towns and so forth. So they adjust those grade levels based on the salary ranges that they fall into. So a good rule of thumb that our consultant had said was one grade level up is a 5%, basically around a 5% increase. So as he's looking at these positions, and you'll see the grade levels move with the new pay plan compared to the old pay plan. And so that's where your increases come into play at. Another thing that goes into the formula is your years of service with the town, and also your time and position in that position. So you could say, for example, someone worked for the town for 10 years. Well, they may not have been in that position for a whole 10 years. Maybe it was 5 years in that current position. So that gets factored into that formula so that they're not starting at that minimum grade level, but their years of experience and then their time in that position is factored in to help them maybe get to the midpoint almost of that pay grade.
And
I would direct council that we received emails on March 31st and April 1st with information about the pay study that broke it down by market rate with all the towns around us, and then also broke it down for Valdese. So we do have those emails with that information.
And you will have the information for each department, each employee, and everything by the end of the week. We will also send it out for the 40-hour versus 35 hours so you can compare. The last thing I want anybody to do is think we're trying to hide something from y'all. That's not the case. It's like Bo says, we didn't want to back you in a corner where an employee sees they're supposed to get a 20% pay increase, and then council says we can't afford that, and we only give them a 15% pay increase. That is pretty common for all pay studies on cities. Another thing that's important to note on the pay study is when you say market rate, this doesn't guarantee that our employees are going to be making more than Sawmills or Longview or Granite Falls. It's to get us in the same market as them. So for an example, even our police, and the reason we're picking on police and fire is because they take up the vast majority of this pay study. We're going to get them close to what Drexel pays or what Longview pays, but not necessarily more than those cities. Fire is the same way. We're going to get close, but not necessarily more. It's all going to depend on your years of service and experience, where you fall in that range. Our goal is to get every employee to midpoint by year 7. If you have 25 years of experience versus someone that has 8 years experience, our goal is to get everybody to midpoint because there's no way for us to afford the additional cost. Plus, I mean, we're talking those long-term employees are looking at 20+% increases right now. That's because they've worked here for so long, and over the time they haven't kept up with market over that long term of employment.
And just kind of piggybacking on what Todd said, this is our first pay study with this council. So there may, miscommunication on the expectations of what material you were going to see. Where Todd worked previously and where I worked previously, the norm was to present the council with the big picture numbers and how it fit in the budget, not to go so detailed as to each individual employee. So I'm glad we're, talking about this and figuring that stuff out together.
And I think the hard part for us was the hourly employees, because I know department heads are a lot of times really taken care of because they do make more, and then when you do an across-the-board adjustment, they see huge jumps, and your hourlies don't see a lot. So we want to make sure, we're not cutting their hours, cutting their pay. We want to make sure we're you know, looking after everyone, especially the ones who do the real heavy lifting. I mean, because those guys are doing that's some serious work they're doing out there. I'm not saying everybody doesn't, but I just want to make sure that we're treating everyone fairly the way they should be.
Sure. And the way the math works, it's hard to wrap your head around this, but there's some employees in our pay study that no matter whether they work a 35-hour week or a 40-hour week, they're still just going to get 3%. So they can be maybe making 3% more working 40 hours, or they make 3% more working 35 hours.
So council's got to realize it's not just the salary that we are responsible for paying for. The reason why the numbers are so huge is because when you multiply it out for, you know, for FICA and Social Security and retirement and all that stuff, it's not just the salary that we're looking at when we're talking about the savings and how much more it's gonna cost. I mean, retirement right now is 16%.
A little over 16, yeah.
So, by cutting those hours, that 16% an hour that the town's realizing that the employee, it doesn't affect them one way or the other, right? So, I just want to make sure that council and the people watching are aware, it's not just the salaries that we're looking at, it's all the benefits that we are mandated by state law to pay for, such as retirement and Social Security and stuff of that nature. And all of that is based off of their base pay. So, that's where a lot of this cost is coming into play. It's not just the salaries, it's the added additions onto that. I mean, at the end of the day, and I've said this before, and I hate saying this, but it's the truth. At the end of the day, it's a mathematical equation. It's just how we plug in the numbers to get to that end of it.
So I know we talked in the retreat about no overtime, but we have over $45,000 budgeted for overtime.
And I don't know if, I think what we was talking about is, when I said overtime, it will give you a buffer before they hit the 40 hours. So if you have 35 hours and you have to work and then you get called back out and you only work four hours, you don't get to that 40 hours. So when I said that, I was talking about it's going to drastically reduce the amount of overtime that we have to pay, because most employees will not get overtime because they will not get it. Now, if we have 29 water leaks in the winter, I mean, there's nothing we can do about that.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm looking at the budget that I was given on, again, Exhibit 5, and it's not drastically reduced. That's why I'm questioning it.
Well, again, we pride ourselves on bringing the few amount of budget amendments to this council as we possibly can. And I've said that this is a pilot program. We're not 100% sure how it's going to work. We didn't want to cut the budget overtime numbers, and then we have a bad winter or a bad summer, and we have a bunch of water leaks, and we have a bunch of callback pays. We have, you know, some major things going on with police and fire that we have to bring. We need that flexibility until we run through a year or two of this to make sure how it works and how it's going to be implemented.
Again, I think that's just part of the clarity. Sorry about that.
And so we're on camera, I just want to make sure we're clear. If an employee hits 40 hours, we have to pay overtime.
Yeah.
It's a federal
Of
mandate.
course.
So
Yeah.
I don't want everybody thinking that we're not following
No,
regulations.
I
So,
realize that that's
okay.
why we're taking it down to 35, and that's the buffer,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying.
So between 35 and 40 would be straight pay. Once they hit 40, it would be, and there will be overtime. I mean, like Todd said, it happened. So we had to account for that in the budget as if they were going to work the same amount of hours if there was a water leak, or just because we would look at going to 35 hours doesn't mean if there's a water leak, nobody shows up, right? So,
I realize that. I'm just saying it's not a significant decrease from last year to this year.
Yeah.
That's why I'm questioning it.
Yep.
You were gonna say something,
Well,
Sarah?
I was just gonna say, a while ago, it was kind of stated that overtime was not gonna be allowed, but I was gonna make the point, though y'all have said it, if they reach that point, it's gonna be allowed. It has to be allowed, so we're on the same page.
So I would just encourage everybody up here. I think that there's some gray area. I just don't know how you can push a budget through without having exact numbers. We don't know exactly how people are going to be paid, and is it fair to have, our hourly workers broken down to only 35 hours a week. I don't know. And then again with
That's a fair
the,
question.
and then again with the building, you know. I know that you're meeting with the LGC tomorrow, and that's why we had to have this meeting today. I realize that time is of the essence, but at the same time, we don't have the full picture of what that's gonna look like for pricing out the public safety building. And I just want to be able to tell the people of this town approximately what it's gonna look like next year when they get their tax bill. Because it doesn't look like it's gonna be able to be paid for as a whole, because it's not $10 million, it's only growing quite fast.
Yeah, and to expand upon your point, why we're meeting today before our LGC meeting tomorrow is because the LGC, they want a game plan of what the council is planning to do before they even consider putting us on their agenda to approve debt in August. So it takes that long to get on their agenda, so that's why it's important to get direction is what we're, because if we go in there and just tell them, well, we're kind of wishy-washy, they're not gonna really be willing to work with us at all. So we've got First Try on board, and they're working through the numbers. LGC has the model. They've looked at it. They looked at our plan. So it's kind of where we're at right now with that.
The last model I saw from First Tryon was $10 million, a 25% tax increase from Burke County next year was needed. And that's all I saw. I didn't see anything after that. So if there's another one, I'd love to see it, moving forward with the 10.8 or the 11.2, because I know that I think it was 2032, we were gonna be in the red.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine that if the number's gone up, then we're gonna be in trouble before 2032, so.
And if, you know, if council decides to hold off, if that's one of the options, and we're back here this time next year, you know, with construction costs the way they are, I'm afraid that we could be at 12.5 or 13 million at that point. Not to try and make everybody, you know, skittish about it, but it's the reality and the environment we're in. So that's why we're trying to get a jump on it now to,
I'm just asking for what it's gonna cost.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to know. I just wanna know what the building, what,
I'd like to know too.
anybody should be able to tell us that. Again, I don't write a blank check.
Yeah, and before any loans approved or anything like that, all those numbers will be hard and fast and in black and white, and council will vote on that as far as the loan terms, and council votes on all of that. We're hoping to have all that done, the hard numbers in June, the banks and all that stuff by the end of July, and present it to council in August. And that's the game plan that we've been operating on. If that has changed, we kinda need to know today. So the last thing we wanna do is go before the LGC and get kind of the pre-approval, and then have to call them and tell them that we've changed our minds. So we've been like I said, we just been operating under that assumption. If that assumption was incorrect, I just need to know.
I've been going off of First Tryon's, what they told us a month ago, and until this week, I was told 10.8, so,
Yeah.
or last Monday, pardon me.
And I will add, there's nothing wrong with telling LGC to hold off if we need to do that. But just realize there's consequences if we do so. It will delay everything. It will delay our guaranteed maximum price through DR Reynolds and getting on the LGC agenda we most likely won't get on their August agenda. So I just want to make everybody aware, this is not a do or die situation with the LGC, but it would just delay things if we were to do that.
And the 10.8 is the not to exceed the loan value. It could come in at 10.2, it could come in at, we don't know. I feel very confident that it's gonna come in somewhere between 10.2 and 11.2.
And there's no way we can get those numbers before the 28th.
No, ma'am, they're still working on.
So it'll be
Well,
more than likely
okay, so
voting.
You gotta realize, we're asking the contractor and all their subs, if you've ever done anything with construction, or remodeled your house or anything, we're asking contractors to give us a number For example, a plumbing contract, they're asking a plumbing contractor to give them a number in June, and they might not be able to do the work until next March, but they've got to stay firm to the number they give us in June. That's hard for them, so.
It's hard for me to
Yeah.
up the taxes 13.5 cents and not know how much I'm actually gunning for, because I feel like it is a blank check. It's saying, we did this for you guys, now you can, give it to us good. So that's what I'm concerned about, because there's a lot of, I'll let the citizens hear today. I've considered things today, and I think that, we'll just hold off right now. I have a lot of questions I can ask in email and get it out there. Did you have anything else?
There'll be, public discussion on the 28th if anybody wants to come and speak. I encourage you to do so. I know that there's individuals that are unhappy, and I don't mean to make anyone unhappy. I just have questions, and I feel that I need to ask those questions for the people of our town.
Do you have any revisions at this time?
Well, I'm asking the questions for the pay study, and I'd like to know what the building's gonna cost. That's my two questions.
Those are the things we are considering. We need to know, so we know what to cut. So, if there's no, do you have any other questions that we need to address today, or?
Do you have any cuts that you would like to suggest?
Well, we talked in the retreat about the 4th of July being on the 4th of July. You said it costs between $60,000 and $70,000 to have it on that exact day. That's a start. How much does Santa cost to have, I was told that it's somewhere around $6,000. Do we really have to have somebody sit there for $6,000?
So, that was the cost that we spend on all the floats, but we also sell those floats to recoup some of that money. It's not just Santa Claus, it is all.
But see, that's the conversation that needs to be had, and I was just asked, what are we gonna cut? And so I'm trying to have conversations.
And we never, I would ask, as far as consideration, that in coming years, we try to do more like, I believe it's Morganton actually has the line items. It's not just a brush over. They actually have it broken down so council can see what is bringing in the most, what is not, so we can maybe recommend, do we need that, do we not? Because we don't see. I could not tell you what, miscellaneous, there's miscellaneous on some of this, and we don't know what that is. So we need staff to maybe, 13 cents is a lot. It's 31% tax hike, and we would appreciate it if staff would say there are things we could do to bring that down, because our citizens are expecting that. You guys, I know that, Todd, you have to stand up for your employees. We have been charged with the duty of standing up for 5,000 people. We've been put in this position, and I, for one, was put here by people who were not for taxes going up. So I have to stand on that, because that's how I sleep at night. Whether anyone else can sleep that way or whatever, I have to know that what I did in my heart was right for the people that I serve. So I understand staff has their thought, I get that, and I appreciate what you do. It's a lot, appreciate what you do. But I do think we need to take more than just staff into consideration. Sometimes we've got to also take in, the 5,000 people who live here that we have to answer to. Because you guys don't get all those, and I know you say turn them to you for questions. No, they come to us with the questions, and they do want to know why we did not live stream the budget retreat. That just really blocks the appearance. It looks like we're not being transparent. And there's a lot of questions as far as the budget. What are y'all doing to cut things? Well, I don't know what can be cut, and we never get a chance to sit in a group. We didn't get a chance this year to sit and talk like this, except for one day, and I know I'm gonna be shut up because it's not considering the budget, but.
Well, last week when Todd had mentioned that we did not have enough money to buy ink for our town clerk, that resonated with people, and it made people call me.
Yeah.
So it was probably not the best thing to say, because now I'm having people say, how are we gonna go and afford a $10+ million building, but we can't buy ink for our town clerk?
Yeah, that was, I was just trying to prove the point that over the last several years, the council before you and the staff before me has cut the budgets significantly, and we're down to not bare bones, but we're getting pretty close. I mean, there are some things that we could cut, but it's services that we offer, or events that we offer, or programs that we offer. It's not, you know, I mean, there's not a whole lot of, there's hardly any, if there's any fluff, I haven't found it. How about that?
At this time, can I engage in active debate? So I'm going to transfer my responsibilities to Mayor Pro Tem at this time. To Councilwoman Ward, I'm going to address something. You've been on this council for 3 years. You know the budget more than Ms. Radabaugh over there. You did not show up at the mini budget meeting. You asked very little questions during the public forum.
What was the mini budget?
Hold on a second, wait just a second. You did not, you vaguely said anything during the public comments at the budget retreat. I do recall that Mr. Herms asked specifically on two particular issues. Do you want to keep fluoride? I need to know in the budget, do we want to go forward with the fluoride? You said nothing. He also asked at the same time, what about the public safety facility? What say you? You said nothing. You had tacit agreement. What is he supposed to do other than present this budget as it is?
When
Hold
they-
on, wait, I'm not finished. I am not finished. You can have your say, but
Yes,
hold on a
Daddy.
second. Ma'am, I'm just saying, at least from this side all the way to him, they have asked Todd, they've asked Bo, they've asked questions. Ms. Radabaugh has called Todd and called Bo and called myself. Ms. Zimmerman has called me, called Bo, called Todd. Ms. Loman has called me.
You need to confer with the attorney
Sir,
about
sir,
calling out
Sir,
another
sir,
council
sir,
member.
sir,
need to
you
confer
have,
with the
excuse
attorney
me,
what you're
excuse
doing.
me, you can silence yourself.
You can silence yourself.
No,
or
sir.
check with the council on
No,
what
sir,
you're
this,
allowed to-
I'm sorry, sir, you do not
You
have,
cannot abuse a council member.
no,
in
sir,
public
sir,
meeting.
I'm sorry.
You need to quiet down or you'll be removed. Don't make me remove your speaker. Don't make me remove.
There's gonna be a lot more of that when the taxes are
I
up
understand.
51%
I
next year
understand,
with
but we're at,
another.
what I'm saying is we're at the 11th hour. If you talk about programmatic cuts of nature of what you're talking about to offset the public safety building, that is something that's going to have to come in the nature of next year because you're talking about a programmatic cut, and I will say this specifically out loud. If you're talking programmatic cut, if you want to cut tourism, that's a programmatic cut. We're talking about, that needs to be thought through the day after. If you sit there and say, we want to do that, you need to think of the consequences of the impacts on the town, not only the day after, but 5, 10 years down the road. How does that change the landscape of the town of Valdese? If you cut out tourism, the rec center, you need to be bold and know what the impacts of that's going to be going forward. You can't sit there at the 11th hour and say, we want to cut tourism or we want to cut rec center to get this Humpty Dumpty back in. We have debated this issue. We've come to this point, and if we don't, the consequences of not paying for the pay study in any form or fashion, or the public safety building, there's going to be consequences beyond we can unravel. And I just want the town to understand that.
What consequences, Mr. Mayor, you talking about?
If we do not get the pay study up for the fire and police, if we do not get the public safety building, it would send a signal to our public, to our police and fire, that we don't value them, and that the next step would take is you'd be informing basically Burke County to say we would orderly want to transfer the responsibilities of the fire and police to Burke County. And you need to know the implications of what you're talking about. These are serious times. I understand that. I've been on the spear both in my military career and also my public career, and I know what it means to cut. I do. I was tasked with that. From a presidential appointee, I know what it means to cut, and you don't get that back. I understand where we are. I'm compassionate for this town. I understand. We have two Valdese right here. I think it's just, let's get this out in the open right now. I think it's time to just pull the skin back. There are two Valdese right now. Those who grew up here that have grown and seen that what's taking place in Valdese with the textiles vacating and all this, they love this town. But they're unwilling at some point to say, we're unwilling to pay for these services. Then we have these, and when they pass on, they're not passing it on to their kids. People are moving in here from Texas, Florida, all points north, south, east, and west. And when they come here, we've heard overwhelmingly, we love what Valdese offers, and we're willing to pay for that. How do we find that balance? And that's what this council is challenged to do. And I apologize for, I want this council to work together. We're going to have hard challenges coming in this next year. Don't let this budget, what we're talking about here, fool you what the challenges going forward is. There are going to be some significant cuts that's going to have to be made in other areas. Public safety is a need. Keep that in mind. Public safety is a need. Elderly that move here, people that move here, one of the main things they look at, Google search it yourself. What do they say? They want a safe town. They need safety. We're old. 70% of the fire department, 70% of the fire department calls are calling for falls and breaks and urgent issues. When you hear that fire truck going out, 70% of that time, that fire truck's taking care of somebody. They need to know that. So what is it, Valdese, that you're willing, there's expectations and a willingness to pay. We've got right now, we've got a condemned building that we've got fire department working out of a mobile trailer. We've got police occupying the front side of this building. We've had to close this building down 3 times in the last year because of safety issues. We had our planner meet somebody at the door, one of these cipher lock doors, thinking it was just an ordinary citizen coming in to want to file a permit. This guy has a felon and said, I'm here to turn myself in. To a town planner. We also had our, correct me if I'm wrong, Bo, were one of our staff down there at the copier room where we had somebody handcuffed, and we're having to try to do town operations with a police subject in custody in the copier room. We cannot operate that way, folks. Let's be blunt. I think it's time to be brutally honest. I think I've talked to the couple over here privately. We need to start talking honesty. If you don't want to pay for it, all right, we understand that, but you understand the consequences that will come thereafter.
Do I have permission to speak now?
Yes, ma'am, you do.
First of all, the budget meeting I missed was due to my child having a medical emergency that I had to take care of. So I chose to be a mother, and I let everyone know I would not be there. So that is where I was for that one. Secondly, I did not ask questions in the budget retreat because we had literally 7 hours to go through everything. And if you had have seen that video, which you did not get to see because it was not live streamed, and I know some people don't prefer to see live stream, but we have several citizens who are quite upset about that. The fact of the matter is I can't ask questions. I have to get that information somehow to citizens so they can inform me, okay, that's not what I want to do. That's not the direction we see our town going. I do listen to the people who got me in this position. I do listen to the citizens in my neighborhood who come up to me and say, we cannot afford this. I'm not saying the public safety building. I'm saying, have we absolutely looked at everything? I know we have to have our police. I know we have to have our fire. That is a moot point at this time. I'm saying we have other things that may need to be looked into. We may not have a lot of fun right now, but to get our public safety, we have to make some type of choices. And when I go to staff and suggest things, or go to anyone and suggest things, it's like running around in circles trying to get an answer, because I'm not a patsy, and I don't say, well, I'll just agree with everything you say because you say it. I want to look into it and get my own opinions and do my own homework and see. 13 cents is a lot. There are people who cannot afford it, especially with right behind it in 27, and you guys hear me now, there is a revow coming, and the reason everybody raised hell, praised hell last time was because there was a revow that caused everything to shoot up. It's going to happen again. There will be a 51%, basically a 51% tax hike by the revow next year. Can we afford that? Without looking, I'm not saying public safety, do not even go to public safety, because you know how I feel about that. I stand behind our police and our firefighters. But there are other things in this town that we may have to look at and say, maybe that's not what we need right now. Maybe we need to look at things like, do we need Fletcher Field? Do we need Tiger Gym? Those are things that have been in this town for years. I get it, but it's time that we look at it and say, are we just propping up things that are no longer useful for our town?
I understand that.
That's all
I
I'm
understand
asking.
that, and that's where we're trying to come to. These are the hard discussions that we're having to have. But we're at the 11th hour. If you say that you're for the public safety building, there is no way, correct me if I'm wrong, Todd and Bo, there's no way in this budget that we can go forward with that in any measurable without cutting a program. Is that correct?
My personal opinion, my professional opinion, I don't think the LGC approves our loan without a long-term plan. We have been operating under the assumption of the tax increase, not program cuts. I don't think we can come up with a list of cuts long enough and big enough to satisfy the LGC at this time. If that's something council wants, we need to realize that we need to delay other things until we get that lined up.
I do not think we need to, I personally will not be able to vote on that until I see hard numbers, just so everyone knows. Until I see how much a public safety building will be, I am not going to be okay with approving a tax increase.
Can I have responsibilities back? You don't need to mention that.
I give responsibility back to the mayor.
Okay, at this time, is there a motion on the table?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Meeting adjourned.